We can begin with the scene of Lancaster House, the gilt-edged diplomacy, Ursula von der Leyen smiling like a cat that's just reacquired the cream, and Keir Starmer, no longer the cautious lawyer, but the man with the pen signing what has been described as the most significant post-Brexit agreement to date. An agreement not of capitulation, but of realism, not a betrayal, but an overdue acknowledgement of fact. And yet outside, in newspapers and the feverish echo chambers of GB News, at least allowing for the moment when the announcers don't fall off their chairs, you'd be forgiven for thinking that Starmer had handed back the keys to the kingdom. Priti Patel warned of lost freedoms, though unable to name any. Nigel Farage muttered something about betrayal with all the pathos of a man who suspects the bonfire he lit is now burning down his own shed. But the substance, the deal isn't rejoining, even if it might be eventually on the cards, but it's reversing some of the worst excesses of Brexit's ideological vandalism, of Brexit's stupid negotiations. It's about sorting out some of the mess left by Lord Frost. British businesses battered by customs costs, border delays, regulatory divergence now have the prospect of smoother trade. A veterinary agreement means your cheddar no longer needs a passport and your Cornish crab no longer gets stranded at Calais. In return, yes, EU fishing vessels will continue limited access to British waters, cue synthetic outrage. But fishing, let's remember, makes up a thimbleful of GDP, fewer workers than the tattoo industry, and that is a result of betrayal going all the way back. I think what's happened to British fishing is disastrous and distressful. But crucially, it's not being hollowed out by this particular arrangement. It's being enabled, in fact, through better access to European markets and a 360 million investment in coastal communities. A betrayal? If so, it's an oddly constructive one. It's trying to repair some of the damage already done, and it's making use of the fact that our fleets have been severely reduced and can't fish the huge amount of water that we've got available. Then there's the Security Pact, a coordinated defence framework with access to 150 billion euros of defence funding in the EU. This isn't simply about procurement, it's about Britain remaining relevant in European security architecture as NATO grows fractious under Trumpian influence. BAE Systems, Rolls-Royce, they all benefit, but Farage, who helped torch the original arrangement, now decries the fire extinguisher, and now is running around the place screaming. But most contentiously, the youth mobility scheme, a potential lifeline for a generation who had their continent snatched away, is not quite there yet. And we need to encourage it to get there. British students could once again work in Berlin bars, study at the Sorbonne, intern in Florence, not as migrants but as neighbours, not as a return to full free movement, but as a re-threading of the human tapestry that Brexit so crudely unravelled. Of course, this has sent certain quarters into hysteria, Kemi Badenoch declaring we are now rule takers, but she misses the point. We've always been rule takers if we want access. That's called being a trading nation. You don't bake cakes without an oven. You don't sell goods to Europe while shouting sovereignty at Brussels and expecting a handshake. The real tragedy is not that this is happening now, but that it couldn't have happened sooner. Remember Theresa May, vilified for being too cautious. Boris Johnson, glorified for being recklessly dishonest. He promised frictionless trade and unicorns. He signed an agreement that tied Northern Ireland into regulatory purgatory, then fled to write his memoirs, which we still haven't seen. Rather likely disappearing Shakespeare book. It fell to Starmer to pick up the wreckage and start over, with bricks, not magic beans. Do you remember that wonderful adaptation of Jack and the Beanstalk with Gene Kelly? A little bit of hope and a large amount of imagination, or vice versa. Now, the Brexiteers squeal about betrayal, having forgotten that it was they who betrayed basic arithmetic. The promise that we could have our cake and eat it turned out to be a dietary hallucination. What we have now is sobriety. a reset, or at least the talk of a reset, a deal that reflects the reality of geography, economics, shared interest. No one's singing Ode to Joy, but we are at least humming something vaguely in tune. And Europe? Europe smells progress. Ursula von der Leyen has even publicly stated what was once unsayable, that perhaps one day young Britons will rejoin. Not through referendum redux, but through pragmatic re-entanglement. The Erasmus programme may return. Professional qualifications may be mutually recognised again. And maybe one day we'll stop pretending that paying more to sell less to our largest trading partner, to be neighbourly, was an act of national liberation. Of course, none of this pleases the culture warriors on the right. They wanted Brexit to mean not just exit, but exorcism. A final banishment of nuance, evidence and cooperation. They cannot forgive Starmer for engaging with Europe at all, not as a hostage negotiator, but as an equal. It's not a full reversal, it's a repair, and it's a signal, I hope, of later realignment. And as the headlines foam and the usual suspects squawk, and we'll hear more about that in PMQs today, I don't doubt, the quiet majority, the businesses exporting more efficiently, the students dreaming of Paris, the coastal towns seeing investment, they may begin to see something new, not surrender, not betrayal, but a hint of competence, a flicker of hope. And if that is humiliation, then let's be humiliated a little bit more often.